All right. Hello and welcome. We are a minute after, which is when I usually like to get started. Hi, I'm Lindsay O'Neill, past president of Learning Roundtable and current chair of the Online Learning Committee. Diana, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, I'm Diana Rush. I am a continuing education specialist with the one of the three Illinois library systems, and an adjunct reference and instruction library and at a community college.
Oh, very cool. I didn't know that. All right, so we've got an icebreaker going on in the chat. I will repost that here. Tell us maybe who you are and where you are joining us from, and also share with us what's something coworkers often come to you for help with. While you think about that, I'm going to do a quick introduction of Learning Roundtable and our mission. Learning Roundtable promotes quality continuing education and staff development for all library personnel. We help you network with other staff development and continuing education providers for the exchange of ideas, concerns, and solutions. We serve as your source for staff development, continuing education assistance, publications, materials, training, and activities. And we are your advocate for quality library staff development and continuing education at both the local and national levels. People that tend to like us are people that work in continuing education, managers that do any sort of training, people that do onboarding, anyone that really enjoys anything related to learning or development. That includes academic libraries, public libraries, all the libraries, anywhere where people need to be trained. We are there to help you out. All right, so today we are talking about showcasing your value. I've got the recording going, we've got the chat open. You're welcome to unmute. If you have a lot of folks that want to talk, maybe raise your hand as we go through. We have some guiding questions for us. Use the chat at any time, and this is being recorded. It will be posted to YouTube. Diana, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Again, I'm winging part of this, so please, your comments and your suggestions and your ideas, we're going to make this really informal, and as in order to best share information and practices with each other. So we're going to be talking about showcasing your value, and my one of the other members of the learning roundtable and I came up with an outline. So I'm going to kind of go through these things, but we're not going to kind of use it as a guideline. So we're talking about showcasing your value. And one of the first, we have like three or four main uh, points of interest that we want to cover. And we're talking about showcasing your value. Um, One of the foundational aspects of that is communication. So how do you communicate your value? So you're communicating, do you communicate your value to your peers, to your direct supervisor, to your board, um, to the library director? And when you get outside, so that's like me from a public library sphere, but when you're talking about the academic or the special library or the school library, then you're looking at the library as um, one one department in many. So from an academic standpoint, library services huge, but it's for us working in the library, but then we're fighting with tutoring services and faculty. I shouldn't say fighting, but we're looking for that validation and that funding and that I don't even want to say recognition, but we're not just talking to the library director, we're talking to the person above the library director, we're talking to the dean, we might be able to talk to the president, and then you're going to have a board from that standpoint. So uh, it is, and I'm going to get a little bit more granular with this when we get down to balancing stats with anecdotes. But so think about who you communicate your value to and how you do it. Is it via email? Are you required to present something to your board? Um, is it a matter of, do you have a one-to-one with your direct supervisor once a month, once a week, once a year? So those are some things that we thought it was important to kind of think about. And how does that communication go? Is it very organic? Um, do you find it easier to write things down or to write things on a note card? Again, totally depends on who your audience is. Um, And then, and I'm gonna like open up for comments and suggestions and have people talk after each topic. Um, and then, so also we talked about like communication too, is like if you're selling yourself on a job hunt. I know that, um, things in all library land are not as steady as we'd like them to be. So, people are and people normally change jobs as well. So it's like, how do you? And this is something for me personally that I hate to talk about myself, and it is so difficult for me to. And I don't even like the term sell myself because it just, I don't know. But yeah, how do you communicate your worth to a potential employer? Is it only through the resume? How do you break down those important points in the resume in the actual face-to-face interview, whether it be via Zoom or in person? And how do you answer those questions in the interview? How do you take the time to think about it, or do you just, I'm always nervous in an interview, so it's like kind of have to just talk out what comes to mind first. And it's a real challenge for me to think about, just take a breath, let your brain clear so you can um, make the answer that you're not going to kick yourself later for. Not to say, but, and I don't mean to say, kick yourself, but just like, oh, I wish I would have said that, or I wish I would have remembered that. So just talking about that from that perspective. And then the last thing I'd like for you to consider, both for yourself and maybe for your staff or your coworkers, where might librarians need the most help right now uh, among these types of communication? So, does anybody want to jump in and have any sort of feedback, suggestions, ideas?
We want to start with the first topic. Maybe you start out with communication. How do we how do we come up with strategies and language for communicating among departments? I'll start. One of the things that took me a while to learn, right now I'm self-employed and my coworkers are vast. Depends on where I'm working at any given time. When I was in academic library, it took me a while to figure out that visibility is really important. I don't want to sound like I'm like manipulative or something, but like, for example, there's a staff person that would collect donations for student worker parties. And I remember she told someone, she's like, the librarians are the stingiest, like they never donate enough money. And I realized part of this was because they passed around the envelope, right? Or you could just go up and like stuff some money in the envelope anonymously. And I realized, no, 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 you need to go up to the staff person and be like, here's my money. Just so you know, I'm being very visible donating this. And that's a little cheesy, but like, you want to be visible, like the money didn't just show up, it came from somewhere. And same thing when you're maybe at work, like when I've had hybrid jobs and the days that I'm in office, I make a point to be like, I'm here. Hi, everybody. Let's make the most of these in-person days. Let's chat. The point is of being in person to talk to other people. So let's go and talk to other people, check in, see how it's going, have lunch, get coffee, walk to the grocery store across the street, whatever. So I'm always really big on visibility because not only does that kind of make me like, I'm here, I'm doing my job, you can see me, but also it opens up and maintains those relationships with other people that you are working with. So that's one way that I kind of open up that communication, especially when I'm in person. And if I'm online, even just checking in with someone over Slack or Teams, just being like, hey, just letting you know some progress, something else that's going on, and just keeping you in the loop. Anyone else have any strategies for communication? Garrison, you want to go ahead? I saw you unmuted.
Dorothy raised her hand, so we'll let her go first, and I'll.
Hey, Dorothy.
Hey, hi. Thank you, Garrison. Um, for me, I found that if I could differentiate between, all right, now is the time to do something, if possible, in person, no more emails, or at very least the phone. And having started, um, important collaborations based on, like Lindsay was saying, you go to lunch together. So that in person, if possible, by phone, when you can, makes sense at certain levels. A lot of email communication is very important and quick and very efficient and valuable. But there would be times that I would pick up the phone, and even if I didn't get the person on the phone, I was able to leave a message where they could hear the tone of my voice, get a little background about why I wanted to chat by phone instead of just email, and it seemed to help. So that was one way of making myself more visible, and sort of a more fuller kind of communication when needed.
Yes, Lindsay's tone is so very, very important. And Garrison, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I just wanted to, excuse me, echo kind of what Lindsay said about the visibility piece. I think sometimes in libraries, we don't always do the best job. Like, even just sharing what we're working on across the library and even like beyond the library sometimes. And that's something that I've struggled with a lot. Like, in my current role or my current job is that our library like is doing great things, but the rest of campus coming out of university isn't always aware of that. And so I think, Diana mentioned like selling yourself is really hard. I think Laura echoed that in the chat. Like that idea of selling yourself or like promoting yourself, whatever you want to call it, can be tough. But I do think like libraries are always doing really cool things. And even like within the library, I work in research services, so I do reference instruction work. So I'm familiar with what my colleagues at other departments like collections and like special art, special collections are doing. Um, but I don't always know like what someone's day-to-day work is. And I think everyone's doing really cool things. And I think just the more opportunity you have just to say, like, hey, this is a project that I've worked on that I'm really proud of. Or like, here's what I was able to do that like made an impact in a patron in this particular way. I think those are all like ways of promoting visibility that like communicating that will raise our visibility. I think it's a really great way we can go about that.
Yeah, so
Awesome.
it sounds almost like you want to have like mini elevator pitches kind of ready to go, especially if you know you're going to a campus meeting and a certain person's going to be there and you can be like, "Hey, you might be interested in the speaker we have coming, or maybe your students would be interested, or whatever your patron base is." So always kind of thinking ahead of like, all right, who's going to be there? What we want them to walk away with, and kind of making sure that they walk away with that. That's a great point, Garrison.
Perfect. And I'll wrap up with just a couple of things. I'm going to talk about that elevator pitch um, a little bit further down, but I was also thinking about I work in a place where so many people work from home 95% of the time. It's just transitioned that way. And so when we have new people, I try to reach out and communicate with them, just say like, hey, I know you're new, like, how are you finding things? Or just being friendly. Sometimes people see your value by how you treat other people. And that might be just, part of the golden rule. But if, uh, so there's that interpersonal level of communication, which can also be a way of showing other people you value them, can also reflect back on how people value you. And so seriously said, I think with communication, being interested in what others are doing and expressing gratitude when you work together on a project, thanking them is important. Absolutely. So, again, not to just talk only about where I work, but we have Zoom for our phones and everything. We have Zoom chat channels and we have a kudos channel and what is everyone reading channel? What are you listening to, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a way for people to still um, communicate um, and give each other shout outs and value people in a way that's just, if you're not always together in person. So,
And just, I just want to say that your additional channels that you have with like, what are you listening to? That's also a good way to maintain visibility. Again, I don't want to sound manipulative, but it's so hard to foster human connection when you're all working online. So that's a nice way to have those communication channels open. Is be like, hey, what are you listening to? Here's a picture of my dog. People love pictures of pets. Just ways to kind of spark any connection that you can. It helps you stay visible and also helps you connect with any coworkers that are far flung.
right. And it also helps you find out what other departments are doing. I mean, sometimes, but especially with, you tend to get really siloed in this online working environment. So you see what other people are doing. And sometimes you, because I mean, and for me, not in this particular position, but jobs past, like there were times where I had no idea what my coworkers did. Um, and that's also a communication thing. So yes, we're going to get to listening in just in just a second. But yes, great point. Garrison said that that's the flip side of communication is that listening piece and hearing and engaging with what other people are saying. Yes, absolutely. Well, that's a great segue into um, our next topic, which we're kind of like looking at the reference interview as a superpower. So if you think about uh, taking the reference interview away from the reference desk and applying that to other communication situations. Not work related, but I'll make this really quick. I mean, this happened with my 87-year-old dad, where English is not his first language. Um, wow, it took me 30 minutes to get to the gist of the point that he was trying to make. So there was a lot of I don't want to say yelling, but increased volumes and a lot of up and down before I went, oh, well, why didn't you start with that? We could have saved ourselves a lot of kind of, I don't know, stress of the conversation. So I think and that's something that I work with being kind of ADHD is that sometimes I tend to interrupt people, not because I'm not interested in what other people have to say or that I don't value what they're saying, but because I want to say yes, and here's, I want to connect with them, but sometimes connecting can really be like stepping back and like listening to what they have to say and be like, oh, that's amazing. Like this is I see what you're saying, or that's a real need that we have. So I'm starting to ramble right now, so I'm gonna stop myself right there. Um, so in the aspect of looking at training needs, whether it's say you're the computer person and you've got to train the two full-time librarians and three part-time staff, you got to look and see, hey, what do you need? Okay, what do you need to do your job better? What do you need to be more confident to come into work today? Um, and you can increase or decrease that as the position, are you a library director and it says, okay, this is what I want this library to be known in the community for exceptional customer service. Where then for that, you might look at your department heads and saying, okay, do we have holes in our customer service? What do we need for training? So but that has to be a back and forth conversation. You can't just go, oh, send me an email and tell me who needs it, or what can we work on? I think there has to be some really uh, um, significant communication to kind of drill down and see what are the real needs. Let's see. And then, so once you do that, uh, want to match resources to those needs. And again, so using a personal example, the library system that I work at, we support 1,200 academic school, special and public libraries across 26,000 square miles. So we have 5 service centers, meaning for interlibrary loan. So, and we have done in-person training at various parts, but Illinois is a huge state. So while Chicago has 3.5 million people and Chicagoland has 7.5 million people, there's just as many people out in rural or smaller suburban areas that need in-person training or want some type of training. And we can't possibly get we have a 3-person team. There's myself, my coworker, and our department head, and that's it. So as we have built our resources and our training, we've been able to uh, communicate this need to in order to best meet our membership that we have Niche Academy because it is asynchronous on-demand training. So that's just an example. I mean, and that doesn't happen overnight. You've got to be patient with the process. And it can be something as big as that, but you can take that and apply that to, if it doesn't matter how big or small your library or your department is. Um, and I'm gonna, you know what? I'm gonna stop there and I'm gonna let other people chime in. And I'd love to hear any examples or any anecdotes that you all might have when talking about how you communicated via some sort of reference interview. And not specifically that reference interview, but if you've kind of had an experience where you can look back and say, yeah, that's how we got there. It wasn't just somebody asked me a question and I gave them the answer and they're here we go. They saw my value because I told them
Yeah,
once in
I'll
an email.
start.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's talk about listening, good listening skills, and matching resources, right, to what folks are communicating. So a few years ago, I learned about a technique called nonviolent communication. It's one of those things that's always in the back of my mind, but there's a book by something Rosenberg, and it's all about, listen, yes, Amy, the office therapist, of course, she's familiar with nonviolent communication. Marshall Rosenberg, thank you. And it's kind of a heady title to it, but basically it's just about reflecting back what people are saying to you so that they feel heard. And I'm not great at this. It's one of those things I really want to be better at. But basically, someone says something to you, and you say, okay, basically what I'm hearing is this. So like if someone's having a bad day, you don't just say like, oh, well, you should hear about my bad day, because no one that's having a bad day wants to be one-upped by your bad day. You want to repeat back to them, oh, you had a bad day. What happened? Was it that guy Steven giving you a hard time again? And you don't have to get it exactly right on the first try what they're trying to communicate to you. The point is that you are trying to understand them, and that makes people feel validated. They'll be like, no, it wasn't Steven. It was the water cooler's out of water again. Whatever it is. And you just respect whatever the feeling is behind it. You don't diminish or try to one up. You just reflect it back and you go, oh, I hate it when the water cooler is out of water. That dang jug weighs 40 pounds, and this one time I almost dropped in. That's scary stuff. And the point is, you're just always trying to reflect back and understand. And then you get to the need. Once they feel really validated, they'll be like, yeah, the tension is usually diffused. So that's something I always want to sell to people is like nonviolent communication. And I feel like that works really well in reference interviews because there's often a feeling or some other underlying need, right? In a reference interview, the students aren't just asking for the stapler. They're asking like, are you a nice person to maybe talk to about my research topic if I were to come back? So, you start with, yeah, the stapler's over there. And by the way, you need anything else? If you're working on a paper, come on back. We'll help you out. And you open up that door. So I'll stop talking. Anyone else have any thoughts about, yes, Dorothy, go for it.
Uh, what you're saying about the reference interview, sometimes people don't know what they need. So that back and forth asking some open-ended questions gets them to think about, I really need this type of training, or I have this gap in my skills. And so I really appreciate this effort to think about that reference interview like questions in talking with staff about upping the ante on professional development. I talked with a colleague here in Maryland a couple months ago, and he uses the reference interview skills when he's interviewing just volunteers, and it really helps draw out, like, for example, a program he might be able to match them to do for the library or some other kind of special project. um, but it is an art and a science, those that reference interview process, and that listening is very important. So
Thank you. Any
Any-
other thoughts
Yeah,
about this?
anyone else want to share about listening, reference interviews, matching wants with needs?
Fair enough.
Oh, sorry. I
Right,
guess one thing I was thinking about, and this is not necessarily when you're looking for a solution for someone, like they might be looking for a solution, but sometimes it's necessary to kind of realize, are they looking for someone just to listen, or do they want you to help them find that solution? Because sometimes I've had interactions where it turns out they really didn't want the solution. They really just wanted someone to listen to them for a while. And so if I had been, trying to find a solution through all that, I feel like I wouldn't have been as good of a listener. So I guess trying to figure that out, because sometimes the person you're dealing with may not know themselves either in that moment, if that makes sense. I don't know.
that's a very good point. Any other thoughts about this, or we'll move on?
I feel like even if you're not providing someone with a resource, I feel like even the act of being a really good listener just opens up that door for future interactions. Going back to the topic of showcasing your value, just presenting as a really good listener and not someone like I met one of my neighbors the other day and she talked a lot at me. And I'm like, oh, I'd love to build a relationship with you, but I feel like I just listened to you talk for 20 minutes. So even being able to establish yourself as someone that is a good listener, people are more likely to approach you in the future if they do need something from the library, if they want to work with somebody from the library, or you establish yourself as someone that like would be good to work with. Garrison, I like your comment. Parks and Rec reference appears.
Trying to get my chat.
Yeah, so Garrison's describing an episode of Parks and Rec where Anne just wants Chris to listen to her rather than trying to uh, fix it. And I think that's a joke about relationships. Sometimes your significant other is like, "Let me fix that for you," and you're like, "No, I just need you to listen." But that act of listening can build your relationship, even if you feel like it's kind of one way.
All right. Sometimes my partner starts conversation. I'm not looking for a solution.
Exactly. You're here to deal with my feelings. If I wanted
Right,
a solution, I'd ask you for
right.
it. Yeah, and that goes for
Right. I'm
coworkers.
not asking for advice.
Yeah, I have a colleague that we often say that, like, oh, your coworkers just need to be gentle parented. We all have like small children at this point. Like everyone around you just needs to be gentle parented. They just want their feelings validated, and that goes at work just as much as it goes for small children. No offense, coworkers. Yeah, Diana agrees. You just need to explain your feelings in the issue, right? You just want to be validated.
And I think for me, like I'm a manager in my job, and so sometimes working with direct reports, they'll bring a problem to me. I have to start and first say, you know, is this a problem you just want to vent about? Like, you know, again, I just often jump into like problem solving mode. I don't want to just be like, oh, let me tell you what to do. But like, are you venting or would you like some feedback on how to approach this? And again, like the sometimes I don't know what the answer is going to be, and they'll just say, oh, actually, I really just wanted to vent. I think I can solve this, but want you to be aware of this, want to vent, or sometimes like, no, can you please help me figure out how to solve this? And so I think especially like when we're managers, it's really incumbent upon that listening piece and that kind of asking before we kind of jump into like, well, here's what you can do kind of thing.
Yeah, that's well put.
And I'm good about too of, asking questions, not yes or no questions. Why? Why
Yeah.
not? In order to get as full of a picture, as complete of a picture of the situation, the need, that you can. Any other thoughts? Speaking about communication, I just realized one thing about myself is just that sometimes I get like really just want things to move around. It's like I need to give people a little bit of grace to kind of think about and get their thoughts together instead of saying, "Hey, let's move on." So it's we're all learning here, I think, in life, and learn something. If I can learn something new about myself at least every other day, I think I'm in the win here. Um, Garrison has a wonderful um, tip here. I often take a sip of water while waiting for people to respond. It gives them time to think, and yes, keeps you hydrated. And when you talk as much as I do, your mouth gets dry.
I wanted to share a professional development that I'm doing right now. It's called cognitive coaching, and it's really aimed towards educators. But it has a lot to do with this communication piece and planning conversations around problem solving, reflecting on situations, and another type of conversation is called a planning conversation. So if someone's saying they're trying to plan like how a meeting will go or a one-on-one will go, and it's talking about a lot of the things that we are about, like asking for permission about like what kind of thing someone's looking for, or like if it's a problem solving or a venting kind of feeling. And also just a lot about that reflecting too. And I just think it's a nice one that sometimes as librarians we don't think like find that kind of training, but it's called cognitive coaching, and I'll add it in the chat because it's all over the place.
Sounds great. Thank you. Anyone else? We good to move on? Okay. So, uh, the third kind of subtopic here is talking about balancing stats with anecdotes. So, too many numbers will sometimes give people the glaze, and not enough numbers, um, especially when you're talking to a board member, because that's, sometimes those numbers are what keeps your funding, whether you're in a public library, an academic library, any kind of library. So, I think the first thing is we're looking at who is your audience, who are you talking to? Is it a board member? Is it a dean? Is it a community member that could help out with donations for your summer reading program? What is that? So each kind of information should be can share a snapshot, and should be easily understood. Again, going to go back and revisit Garrison's uh, elevator pitch. So using the academic library as an example, if you've got 60 seconds with a dean, and literally you might just have 60 seconds with a dean, who is looking at, multiple departments, looking at faculty, looking at, tutoring, depending on, what they are a dean of. What are you going to put in those 60 seconds that is going to have the most impact? Um, so I'm going to jump to my example is that for us, for an academic, what has the most impact? So Post-COVID, as students and faculty came back to the classroom in person, to the library in person, our library started, we ended up doing 185 instruction sessions in the first 2 months of that spring semester. Then we were coming back, which was like an over 200% increase of our numbers from pre-COVID. Okay, so wow, that's huge, a big jump in library services. But if you want to keep going with that, is to find out how many of those. So, what the biggest thing in an academic is they want to see what the graduation rates are. So, if you say those library services support student success, and the student success is in academic year 2025, 2026, we had an increase of students who graduated and completed their associate degree or their certificate, etc. That is what gives impact to a dean. So that's what you would use in your 60 seconds. So it is depending on who your audience is, you want to figure out how to synthesize the information that's most impactful. And can you balance it with an anecdote? Like for us, we had a student recently email us and quite a few departments on campus saying, thank you for your support. I wouldn't have been able to do this without you. I graduated in December and I'm now going on to a 4-year school. I never would have done this without A, B, and C. And library was A. So that's just an example of looking at graduation rates, but you know what? Here's a personal story. And also looking at alumni too is also and I'm sorry, I don't mean to spend too much time on an academic, but it was just the first thing that came to my mind. Um, so you want to illustrate your outcomes effectively. Sometimes it's to justify funding. Sometimes it's just, thank you, Dorothy. Sometimes it's to justify jobs. Sometimes you're connecting your staff um, to morale. Like this is why we do what we do. Um, and I know it's hard work. Library work is hard work, and no one's going to say that it's not. We deal with so many different things, from dealing with people, whether they're students or patrons, or we're in a corporate library and we're dealing with, research questions on that front. But then we're also social workers and we're doing our collection development and we're gathering statistics. So there's so much to the work of the librarian that, it's important to kind of step back and go, hey, and it's important for me to look back to say, hey, why am I doing this? I'm so stressed out. Libraries are just going crazy. This is why we do what we do because it matters. And this is why it matters. So that's going to be different for you, regardless, where you work, what your community is like, what type of library you're in, what your job description is. But that is just something to think about. Um, that was Casey. So I'm gonna like kind of wrap that part up on my end. But I'd love to hear any thoughts and suggestions or feedback about balancing stats with anecdotes. And I think also too, we may need to do something about data in a future training exploration. So go ahead, Lindsay.
So, stats with anecdotes. So, when I was an academic librarian, I had a personal project where I created some e-learning tutorials. And I was revisiting this the other day because I applied for a job and I was like, what was that thing that I did? And I ended up I looked at the stat and I'd collected stats on it and I had like 800 something students that I reached through these e-learning tutorials. And that's like the only number I remember. But I feel like, that's a powerful number to be able to tell library administration or anyone outside the library, like, hey, at a minimum, the cost of the software I used to create these tutorials is justified because in 2023, whatever, we reached 800 something students, and those online tutorials meant that they were asynchronous and they didn't have to come into the library and we didn't have to have any additional labor. So this was scalable. So I always really like those ideas of like, you don't want to bombard someone with numbers, but having like one or two on hand for a given topic that you know affects someone or someone would be interested in, or is a nice talking point that would stick in their mind. It's always really useful to keep in your back pocket. So I don't want anyone to ever feel like data and statistics has to be really onerous. Just having a general picture and being like, hey, we reach hundreds of students. That was because of a partnership we had with first year experience. And look at what we did with our very limited resources. This was very scalable, and we might want to consider expanding that or, you know, partnering up with other people. So I love a well-placed stat that will stick in someone's mind. And one stat I think is often better than more than one stat just because it's retainable.
Mhm. Well said. Um, how do people feel about data as using that as a way of communicating your value? Do you feel comfortable with it? I'm still at the very beginning. I mean, I feel like I'm behind as far as data goes, but that's because I work at a place that has a small data team and they're fantastic. So I don't get so much hands-on for myself, but interested in what other people might uh, feel about that or what their experiences are, if anyone wants to share.
Well, I just want to add that even low-level statistics, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be a data visualization created using something fancy. It can be like, hey, personally, I taught 23 library instruction sessions last week. Like, it was wild. And if you scale it up, you know, I taught so many last year, and my team, or as part of the team, I taught like you said, your stat with the you increased 200% in your library instruction sessions, right? Like that is so many that you taught. So even having basic stats like that, I think can be very powerful. And if you even do a basic calculation, like say the average length of those was like an hour and 15 minutes, all of a sudden you can see we spent hundreds of hours teaching students to do this thing. And you can see in our graduation statistics, students cite the library as being valuable and they talk about these library instruction sessions. So even being able to do just very small, like connections, very small calculations, it doesn't have to be fancy. And it can take, you know, 15 minutes to gather those stats. It can be very powerful, I think, in the big picture.
Yes, I agree. Oh,
Garrison, you just shared a nice comment. How to make your data readable and tell a good story. I feel like I'm hearing more about the need for data in libraries. I'm hearing more of the pressure on libraries to be revenue generating, which I don't care for revenue generation from libraries. But I do hear about it, and you know, if you don't have a choice, you don't have a choice. You got to generate revenue. You got to have those data on hand. But also, that can also head off the need to revenue generate if you do have even basic stats or data on hand, I think. So it doesn't have to be complicated, but thank you for sharing that, Garrison. I'm definitely going to take a look at that.
Yeah, I definitely recommend if anyone, is like me and just not great with data or like representing data visually. Like I thought this presentation was really great, just breaking that down to like, here's a few key things you can use to like take data you have and just to be aware of so that if you are presenting it to board members or stakeholders or someone, like it's helping to tell the story that you want to tell. So really, really great link. I definitely encourage anyone who struggles with data to check that out.
Yeah, that's great. Just taking a quick look at your PDF. It says, don't present a table of dense data, present a bar chart. That's pretty easily done with, you know, Excel or even these AI tools, depending how you feel about AI. You can create something super fast. So it's not a lot of effort. There's a lot of free tools available online for really quick visualizations, which can just be a chart.
I am. I'm sorry, I have my sharing my lovely pup in back of me. Hopefully she made you smile today with her little sweater. It's like 7 degrees out here in Chicagoland area. Let's see. So the last subtopic here that we're going to be talking about is managing process projects and processes. So looking from that, is a in relation to how to showcase your value. Um, Casey Wallace, who I worked with this outline on, talked about, a lot of people think, oh, I don't really have any project management skills, and but you do. They just might not be something you learned in a project management class or a webinar, but there's so many things that you have done throughout your career, out your job that you've implemented. You might have implemented a new way of doing things, a way of streamlining, a way of um, doing something more efficient. You may have added volunteers to your summer reading program, and that had to be a whole process. So, this is kind of like a way of us asking, like, hey, step back and look at everything a little bit more critically with is this a process that I have adapted? Did I institute a new technology to make this better? And so this is just something that you can use to showcase your value at work, at your current job, and also something to to put on your resume. If you can frame it within that project management piece. Um, so even though if you don't have, that PMP designation, that doesn't mean that you don't manage projects on a day-to-day basis, because many of us do. Whether it's, collection management or gathering reference statistics or all of, the wide variety of uh, tasks and duties that fall into the librarian role. So I saw someone just put something here in the chat. So let me see. Um, Ah, so Donna had a great thing about setting up a form for the reference desk or intranet and asking staff to answer 2 to 3 quick questions about each interaction is a good way to just start collecting stats. Fantastic. That's also a process that can be implemented and then evaluated and improved upon if needed. So yeah, this last subtopic is just kind of a way to say, hey, look at what you do and what you've done in the past, and can you kind of frame that um, and put that under project management skills. So that's yeah, so that's basically the last part there. So does anybody have any thoughts or things that they've talked about? Go ahead, Lindsay.
I just want to say that for the longest time, I was like, oh, I don't have any project management skills. But at the same time, I was leading committees, running projects, and getting them to completion, which to me is just kind of like, well, you just break it down into steps and you go step by step and you check on, each status of each step. And if you farm out pieces, you check on them. And I'm like, well, that is project management. So I want to encourage all of you just to think about what you're good at and what you've done and if you say anything like, I'm not bad at X, think about reasons that might not be true or reasons you might just be feeling like, well, again, like you didn't get your PMP or whatever. I don't have my PMP, my official project management certification, but I have seen a lot of projects through to completion. And you know what? My project management skills actually aren't half bad, seeing as how the projects do get done. So just keep that in mind. If you ever feel like you don't have some sort of qualification, look for reasons that might not be true. You can talk to a friend, you can talk to AI, like, hey, let me think of maybe some examples of this and why it may not be true. And maybe I can use these anecdotes, like we are talking about anecdotes throughout this session, to explain why I am actually pretty good at those things or I have demonstrated those skills. Maybe they're things you want to develop more, and you can always talk about that when you're interviewing or talking to somebody. But you can say, well, I do have a really good foundation, something I want to work more on, but my project management is pretty good. Sometimes I wish I was a little bit more systematic or I used a specific tool maybe that I haven't tried out yet, but I really want to encourage everyone to Find confidence. Fake it. If you don't have it, fake it until you make it. That's a great way to showcase your value. You should think about why might you be wrong and flip it and really show why you are good at something.
Um, agree with you 100%, Lindsay. And even I was always, when I was in past positions where I wasn't given the authority to kind of oversee a project per se, uh, but I may have been on a committee and I may have instituted like, hey, this could improve the process or make the process more efficient if we use this technology. Or so it might even not be an overall project management, but you can talk about like how you um, can look at the different parts of our process and how looking at each part and making something more efficient or instituting a particular evaluating the process and then finding ways to make the process better. So even if you don't have the role where you could say, well, I oversaw this particular project or I oversaw this, you can still look at those pieces that you do and they're still valuable. So don't sell yourself short. Sorry, it's trite because it's true. Um, so anything, I'm going to give people a couple, okay. Laura says, in transitioning careers to library work from an unrelated field, but I use libraries a lot, yay. How is it best to showcase translatable skills on a resume that will go to multiple libraries when it wouldn't be obvious from past work? Would you put bullets of translatable skills or write a paragraph about these? I'm going to let my committee members answer.
I have so many opinions about this. I'll be short. So I teach in a graduate program for instructional design, and they ask me a lot for job advice. I always say the first thing that I want people to do is look at the jobs you're applying for, see what they're asking for, and use that exact language. So I would recommend always tailoring a resume to each job posting, especially these days when AI is screening everything. Use the words from that job post in your resume and in your cover letter. So I like things to be more skimmable. I tend towards bullet points rather than paragraphs because you want a hiring manager that's looking at something just to be able to go boom, 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 lead with that verb and make it super clear. And if you did that certain thing in multiple jobs, put it in every single job. I like to have a summary section at the top that really just summarizes like here's what I am and what I'm good at and why it's relevant to that job posting. Maybe you disagree, but I think that's really important. Just use the language, make it skimmable, and make it very actionable.
Go ahead, Garrison.
I'll echo what Brianna put in the chat. I'm a very big advocate of the cover letter, and I will with the caveat that that is me, and there are people who are not big cover letter fans. So your mileage may vary, but I think especially if you're transitioning careers, your cover letter is a really great place to make the case for what you have done and how those translate. So like, pick out a few bullet points from the job description and then identify a few key skills from your previous job and say, you're looking for someone who can do instruction to undergraduates. My previous job, I broke down complex information to a lay audience, like in this way, like making that connection, but then also demonstrating your interest, like why are you applying for this job and what excites you about this job? And then how does your previous kind of career fit into that? To me, that goes so much of the way. Like a resume for me is a bunch of information without a lot of context, and a cover letter is where I can find that context, and that helps me distinguish between candidates who might have, you know, qualifications that are kind of hard to like compare. But the cover letter for me is what helps me really distinguish and kind of identify the candidates that I think are strongest. So I think a good cover letter with including what your existing skills are and how they translate to the needs of that job you're applying for.
Well said. And as long as we're just talking about cover letters, very quickly, should they always be limited to one page?
I think one page, except for academic libraries. I feel like
Okay.
academic libraries love a wordy cover letter. Depends on the industry. Yeah. Yeah, Brianna says, yeah, one page. Garrison not for academic libraries. Yeah, I remember I applied for some academic librarian jobs where it was like 3 pages. And hey, I got the job, so it must have worked.
There you go. Any other questions, thoughts, feedback? I'm going to give it a few minutes as you're thinking if there's something you want to leave the group with or ask the group about. I would like to say uh, that if you have ideas for what you would like to see us do, this is like only my second year on this committee, so I think that we have been starting to build this committee back up again and start to really provide a good service for members. So any ideas that you have, you can reach out. I'm going to put my email here um, in the chat. So feel free to do so. Or on the ALA. Um, it's been a long day already. It's only noon. Um,
I put my email too.
Thank you. On ALA Connect, that's the word I'm
Yeah.
looking for. Thank you. So yes, feel free to reach out with feedback or ideas. Thank you so much for coming and for interacting and listening and providing, questions. It's been a really great conversation. So thank you so much. And I am going to let Lindsay wrap up.
Wonderful. Oh, Garrison. You're so sweet to offer your time. That's great. Thank you. Um, Before we wrap up, this has been recorded. It'll be posted to the members only section on Learning Roundtable's website. We are currently soliciting proposals for our training showcase. It's both in person at ALA Annual and also virtual. You don't have to be a member or pay any money to participate in the virtual training showcase. If you have a tip or idea you can share with people that like to do training, you are welcome. You can view last year's training showcase, virtual training showcase, which is online, but we are seeking proposals and would love to have any of you. Thank you all so much for being here. If you're not a member of Learning Roundtable, we'd love to have you. It's $15 a year, provide a lot of value, I think. And we do appreciate any feedback that you have because we want this group to work for you. Any closing thoughts, anybody? We've got 2 more minutes.
Oh, thank you, Kristen.
All right, I'll go ahead and stop the recordings if anyone does have any thoughts. You have to be recorded.